My name is Dan Sweeney. I am the Deputy Opinions Editor for the South Florida Sun Sentinel. With me is Randy Schultz, who is helping with on the editorial board, especially for races in Palm Beach County. He has a long familiarity with Palm Beach politics. And also here are Natalia Galixa and Scott Travis, who are newsroom reporters. You should know that they have no influence on who the newspaper decides to endorse. They are covering this race from the newsroom side, and there's a pretty strict wall between news and opinion. And so they may ask questions, they may be covering this race, but they will not have any influence over who the paper endorses. Our opinions editor, Steve Bosquet, unfortunately can't be here, which is another reason to record this so that he can watch it later and we'll get his feedback as well. But we want to kick it off by asking each of you to explain in a minute or so why you are the best candidate for this position. And apropos of nothing, I'm just going to go in alphabetical order, which means Mr. Ferguson, please start us off.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Edwin Ferguson. I'm the best candidate for this position because I have the most diverse background in regard to being a former school teacher, former AP chemistry teacher at Suncoast, as well as an Algebra 1 teacher at Palm Beach Lake. So I saw firsthand the difference between the schools that have, the so-called have-nots, my alma mater, Suncoast, and those who historically have not, and understanding that we have to do a better job of making sure we disperse the resources throughout all of our schools equally for the benefit of the greatest number of kids. But then also on the private side, I've been an entrepreneur for the past 17 years. I don't think either of my opponents can come close to that. And I think that's important because one of my biggest positions is that we should be doing a better job of encouraging our students to aspire to be business owners. I see a correlation between locally run business or locally run companies and us having lower local unemployment rates. And if we have fewer people out of work, we have fewer people that are apt to get sucked into the criminal justice system. I've seen in my 17 years a great number of those clients that I've represented as a criminal defense lawyer choose poorly in regard to engaging in criminal acts. And I found that the greater majority of them are not deviants per se. They're not Ted Bundys, or you can think of any number of persons who just mentally are wired differently than the greater majority of us. They were trying to make ends meet. So I don't excuse their actions, but I understand that if they had a better option available to them in terms of gainful employment, or hopefully even running a business, I don't want to cap people's possibilities at always working for someone else. But again, I see a correlation between lower unemployment rates and lower crime rates. Also, I'm sure we'll get into it. A number of different PACs and other organizations, concerned citizens, have already weighed and measured myself against the other candidates in this race. And they also have found that, Edwin Ferguson is the best candidate at this time for this seat. I hope I was not over a minute, but if I was, please forgive me.
Maybe a little, that's all right.
Mr.
Persaud.
Yeah, good evening. I just want to thank and give a shout out to my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, my Church of Divine Revelations, Pastor Lionel and co-pastor Tanya Minot. Why I did this was because I decided to take a stand. I went viral, obviously, for taking a stand against Palm Beach County's mask mandate. I didn't like where it was heading. I didn't like the direction where leadership was going. You could see it throughout the country. They passed policies that brought us to our knees, and the same policies are being governed in our school board. So with that in mind, I look at it from an educator standpoint, and just from being in the field of 10 years and seeing the need in the younger class, because I worked elementary, that we do need teachers to make these decisions. There's a lot of decisions that's being made by people that aren't in the field or haven't spent even years in the field. They opt out, or they go somewhere else because, with the way it is now, you can't keep teachers. There's a mass exodus happening right now. And just looking at that and the morale with school district employees and where we're at as a whole, especially with suppression of parent voices, I decided to take that stand and decided to run and, make a challenge in the battlefield. So I have, my hand in this fight as well. And I believe I am the best candidate.
Okay. Mr. Smith, go ahead.
Hey, good evening. Corey Smith for District 7 here in Palm Beach County. I'm running basically because public education has been under attack, remains under attack, and I have a unique skill set to make it to change that and to fight those attacks. Those attacks are coming in the forms in which I have the most experience in. I'm uniquely qualified for this position and best suited for it because number one, like Mr. Persaud and Mr. Ferguson, I have taught in the Palm Beach County school system. I taught at South Tech in the mid 90s after college. After I graduated from law school, I became an assistant public defender and I worked there for 4.5 years. So I know that when we talk about knowing the trenches, I've handled thousands of criminal defense cases and I've tried over 100 cases, non-jury and jury combined. When I left the public defender's office, I didn't go out and try to make $1 million in private practice. I went to work at the school district as an associate counsel. So I'm the only person in this race who knows the field of education from a legal perspective. I've advised the school board. I've represented them in Tallahassee. I've litigated on a myriad of cases. I've handled OCR complaints. I've done almost everything from a legal perspective that you can do on from an education standpoint. And I continue that work 11 years now in my private practice. Over 50% of it is in the field of education. I also have governing board member experience. So I'm the only person in this race who's actually run a school and performed the work of a governing board, of a school board member. We've managed budgets. We've adjusted budgets in real time to match the realities on the ground. We've managed employees. We've dealt with curriculum issues. I've done all that work. I did that for about 7 or 8 years right here in Palm Beach County. I'm a native here, born in actually Good Samaritan Hospital, raised in Riviera Beach all my life. I'm a product of Palm Beach County schools. I have 4 children, one who's a 2020 graduate of John I. Leonard. And then I have my other 3 are steps, elementary, middle, and high school, all the way from Alamanda Elementary to Roosevelt Middle to now Palm Beach Lakes High School, which is my alma mater. I was a member of the first graduating class out of Palm Beach Lakes in 1989. So, if we talk about, what issues we want to see get done, one of the biggest things I see is that, I want to see the school to workforce pipeline enhanced. And when I say that, there's a myriad of things that go into it, and we'll talk about that more, I know, but that's one of the main issues I want to focus on. But those are the main reasons why I'm best qualified. Oh, I'm sorry, and I forgot to say, I've actually served as an elected official as well on the Thousand Oaks Community Development District, where we kept our taxes low on behalf of our constituents. Again, I'm sorry for taking over a minute.
Okay, that's okay. Mr. Persaud brought up something that I think everybody should address because it's been brought up in just about every Palm Beach School Board editorial board endorsement interview that we've done, which is a mass exodus of teachers, as he calls it. I've heard, teachers are leaving. We can't attract teachers. Some permutation of that. Just about every Palm Beach school board race that we've looked into. How exactly do you address? First off, of Mr. Smith and Mr. Ferguson, is there a serious problem with teacher retention and attracting new teachers? And second off, how do you address that, particularly when the amount of funding you have is largely dictated not at the county level or the board level, but by the state? Mr. Smith, why don't you start?
All right. So thanks for that question. Well, and you're right, Mr. Sweeney. It's more of it's a state budget issue. And that delves right into what I was talking about public education being under attack. It's been under attack, like I said, for more than 20 years. We've seen that we've seen constant underfunding of our educational system, which forces us to crunch numbers in the budget, quite honestly. So to your question, how do we address that? Yes, number one, yes, I do agree that there's a problem with retaining and recruitment of teachers. The bottom line is that we don't pay them enough. We don't value them enough, and we don't pay them enough. So how do we do that? We do more of a required local effort, and that's what's going on with the referendum. That's why I support it. Until we can fix the problem in Tallahassee, which is, like I said, it's more than a 2-decade-old problem. We have to do what we can here locally, and if I got to pay a couple more dollars on my property taxes to make sure that we keep arts, PE, and other teachers even employed, let alone give them the raises that they deserve, I'm willing to do that.
Okay, Mr. Persaud, I'll come to you last because you're the one that brought this up, so I'd like you to address it after you hear the other two. Mr. Ferguson, could you go ahead and take this on as well? Is there a problem with teacher retention, and if so, how do you attract more teachers under the circumstances you have?
Well, there's obviously a problem with teacher retention, as evidenced by the fact that we have an unimaginable number of substitutes who essentially are de facto teachers for large stretches of the school year. It's not all based on the salaries. This is a public position, so most teachers probably do not anticipate making, say, $1 million in 10 years of work. We do need to do more in regard to ensuring that they have a much more competitive salary, particularly considering the cost of living down here in Palm Beach County. But in my conversations with teachers, recent conversations with teachers, it seems to be more in the realm of support, where they feel overwhelmed, not having adequate planning period time, and not just having adequate planning period time, particularly for the younger teachers, the less experienced teachers, being shown how to properly make use of that time. Okay, fine. I have a classroom of 25 to 30 kids. Okay, that's not ideal, but hey, I'm in it for the love of the students. I'll deal with that. Okay, you're paying me 40 or some odd grand, 60 probably would be better based on these increasing rents and what it costs for food, but I'll still make it happen. But what's hurting them is you onboard them for a very short period of time, and I'm sure Mr. Persaud can speak to that as well, and then you kind of leave them out to the wolves. So you have these students being led by relatively inexperienced people who don't have adequate guidance. So to a person, it would appear that, yes, salaries are very important. I mean, we can't stress that enough. But if you would just give us a little more direction and give us more time to properly prepare each day, each week, each month, and each year, I think you would see that you would have more people staying. I feel they feel overworked and unsupported. Not even the underpaid part, that goes without saying. That's part of the reason why I left back in the early 2000s. I just didn't see how to make ends meet. And I'm happy of the decision I made, but I'm not unique in that regard. And I think that had I stayed, I would have been a pretty good teacher. But in any event, I think it's the support piece that definitely is kind of the silent killer here, and is the ultimate reason why people are leaving in droves.
Okay, Mr. Persaud, you brought it up in the first place, so
Yeah.
I'd like to see how you address it, particularly as both of your opponents have said that they support the November ballot measure to keep the 1 mil tax rate to increase teacher salaries and so on and so on. You said you don't support any tax increases. If that doesn't pass, would we not see a huge cut in teacher salaries? So you're saying on one hand, there's a huge problem with retaining teachers, but on the other hand, you're saying you would essentially support cutting teacher salaries, aren't you?
So we look at values and raises as solutions, and that's not where it is. That you look at the referendum, and that's something that's an extension to what the salaries or what teachers should have. They should be honored with a salary, and it shouldn't be assigned to based on an outside tax or a referendum. It really should be worked upon within the actual salary itself. I started at $38,000 out of college, and you essentially someone that's been 10 years and someone that's coming in right now, they're going to essentially make the same thing. So when you look at that and you look at the morale and you look at where things are going, you look at teachers having to argue for over a 1% raise and to negotiate to a 3% raise, you can see the frustration. And anyone on the outside looking in is like, no, we are not joining forces with them. We are not going to be under Palm Beach County. I could tell you a handful of teachers, they cry when their kids tell them I'm going to school for education. And it's sad because you have great educators that have built educators within their families. And it's just sad. It's sad that we're looking at things in such a monetary way where we're not taking care of the teachers. Even with the evaluations, they're so biased. To be highly effective in Palm Beach County, you have to essentially work 8 to 15 hours overtime above your contract to even make that kind of rating. So it's very subjective. It's very biased for every teacher. And I would just agree with it that they are in the trenches and their voices aren't being heard. And that's where I would say I would agree with the referendum. I would, but you're going to hear my option to say, well, we need to do right by the teachers.
I'm sorry. So when the referendum is on the ballot in November, will you vote yes or no?
I will vote yes for the referendum for teacher salary.
Okay. I'm going to throw it open to Randy or Scott. If you have any questions, fire away.
I have a couple for Mr. Smith. Thanks everybody for coming.
Yes.
Are you supported by Dr. Robinson, Dr. Deborah Robinson, the incumbent?
I am
And
proud to have her support.
right, and because Mr. Ferguson, of course, ran against her 4 years ago. She
correct.
decided not to run. Have you made any commitments to her in terms of appointments to boards or things like that?
Absolutely not. And she hasn't asked for it.
Okay. How long did you work on the school board's legal team?
I did it in 2 stints. I did it from 02 to 04. When I left the public defender's office, I left in 04 to start a private practice. Was there for about 4 years. And then I went back in 2007 and stayed to 2011. So total about 7 years, just about total.
Okay. And do you think Dr. Robinson was an effective school board member?
I think she was effective in advocating on behalf of the most underserved students in the county in District 7. Yes, I do. We don't have the mission statement that we have. We don't have the equity statement that we have right now without her leadership.
And Mr. Ferguson, you ran against Dr. Robinson, of course, as I said, 4 years ago. How would you compare the two of you in terms of your differences or similarities with the incumbent?
I would consider myself to be a proactive person. I think that if you ask me to compare and contrast myself with Mr. Smith, he's more reactive. He's in this race because he was asked by Dr. Robinson, if we're being honest, to run in the race. And ironically, had she decided to stay in after he had spent all this time, campaigning throughout the county, he would have acquiesced. That goes to show me that his level of commitment to this seat and to the students is not what it needs to be. I've always said this is the most important political office in Palm Beach County. No other remotely comes close to this. And you have to be passionate all the time, every single day, to be effective. And you may recall that was my honest assessment as to why it was time for Dr. Robinson to move on 4 years ago. She had asked me to run, and I stand by that. And she had asked others in prior years. Even Corey Smith told me that she had previously asked him on one or more occasions to run. So, and I'm an old football player, and we have this slogan that when you're thinking about retiring, you should retire. Because unless you can give it 100%, you're not going to be you're not going to be your best, and somebody's going to get hurt, probably you. In regard to Dr. Robinson, yeah, she's been a lot of times the loudest voice in the room, but as a business owner, it's about results. What have we gained in District 7 for that advocacy in that way? She's a lot of times been out on the island, been an island on her own, and I don't think it necessarily had to be that way. I think you can advocate for your local constituents and still find points of consent with others throughout the district, because ultimately it's about what's in the best interest for all of our kids. But of course, you won't leave your local constituents behind. I think that's something that that I'll always do because I've done it before. I would like to know though what the grounds on which Mr. Smith left the district back in 04, and then what the grounds were in 11, because it's my understanding that at one point it was based on termination. So he's represented that he has this unique experience that kind of separates him from the other candidates. And I am concerned. I'm wondering about that. And I would also add that we're not trying to be chief district attorney right now. We're looking to be an elected official, and we have to deal with a myriad of things that aren't even legal. Mr. Persaud spoke about the hearts and mind of teachers. Well, I think that's the main reason why our students in District 7 have suffered for so long. We haven't done an effective job of motivating both them, their parents, and their surrounding community to fully engage. And that's something that I've been doing for my entire time since 05. I've never taken a day off in that regard. And I think my record proves that. And I don't think anyone here would even come close to trying to contest that statement that I just made in regard to my past history. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Smith, you want to respond to some of that?
Oh, absolutely. First off, in all frankness, Dr. Robinson and I did have a conversation. I'm not a politician. I've run for office one time, and like Mr. Ferguson has ran several times every time an office comes up. So this is not something that I planned on doing. However, my candidacy does stand on its own. My credentials stand on their own. I don't take a short or a second to anybody. Again, I stand on my credentials that I have been an education attorney for the last 20 years, and I've been a practicing attorney for the last 24 years. So, I'll even delve in further and be transparent about it. When I left the district in 04, I resigned to start my own practice because that's what I wanted to do. However, when I left in 2011, my contract was non-renewed, but it was not non-renewed based on work performance. It was non-renewed based on organizational politics. And had Mr. Ferguson been a part of an organization, he might understand what organizational politics are.
Why was it not renewed? Politics, you said?
Organizational. Yes, it was not working.
Explain that to us, please.
So Gerald Williams was the chief counsel at the time. He's a mentor of mine. The Law Academy at Palm Beach Lakes is named for him. He passed away, unfortunately, in 2010. My then senior attorney assumed the chief counsel's position on a temporary basis, and then somebody assumed his position as my senior. When the district decided not to keep that gentleman as the chief counsel, he non-renewed my contract and then took my position.
Who we were talking about now?
Bruce Harris.
Okay.
And as a matter of fact, when we talked about it in all frankness and transparency, he said, Corey, this is a move that I have to make. It's happened to me before because I was not renewed once upon a time because of the same reason. So, you know, I don't hide that. It's not something that is not something that I run away from. But the idea that it's a mark on my record and a mark on my experience is an attempt to deflect from the fact that the experience on the other side is lacking, and and trying to detract from the experience that I do have. So
Okay.
And can you hold on just a
That's
second?
not what I said.
sure.
Can you when you say you and Dr. Robinson had a conversation, does that mean she asked you to run and you said because she wasn't going to, and then you said okay?
Well, there's a story behind that as well, and we can be open and transparent about that too. I've known Dr. Robinson for the better part of 27, 28 years. When I was her children's summer camp counselor at Gaines Park. You know, I didn't know her, but I knew the father from, quite honestly, pickup basketball around town, and her being the parent of the boys who were in my summer camp. I then reconnected or got reacquainted with her while I was at the district as an associate counsel. Dr. Robinson knows that I have expertise in education law, and in looking to try to solve some of the district's problems and trying to gain more information, she asked me about a year ago about an issue related to charter schools, about organizational structures and how LLCs run and that kind of thing. And we had a conversation, and then she frankly asked me, and I knew this already because I had heard in the community that she didn't want to run the last time, or the time before, quite honestly. And she asked me, had I considered running? And I said, no, I hadn't considered doing that. And she said to think about it. And I thought about it. It took me about 3 months. And then I decided, to use the old adage, luck is where the intersection of preparation and opportunity meet. And I decided, I ran for office once before, way back in 2007 here in Riviera Beach. But my family grew, and I never got involved in politics again because I had a growing family. But now my children are older, a little bit more self-sufficient, don't need daddy around as much, and quite frankly, don't want daddy around as much. So I did take Dr. Robinson up on the offer. Now, the idea that I wouldn't run if she got back in the race, that's not true. Because again, I stand on my own, my credentials stand on their own. And once we talked about this and settled on it, it is what my candidacy.
Okay. All right, and I had just one from Mr. Persaud, so we don't leave him out. It doesn't relate, obviously, to Dr. Robinson, but you're a teacher. You have policies and rules in your classroom, I assume?
Yes.
Right. So you come in, all the kids are standing around. They're not in their desks. They're just standing around talking. And you say to them, hey, I need to have you in your desks. And they ignore you. What do you do?
You ask why?
Yeah, but what if they don't do it? What if they simply refuse? Do you have to discipline them? Do you believe that if you have a policy in your classroom that the children should follow it?
Well, I'd ask why, and maybe
But do
I
you
might
believe
stand
do you
with.
believe
Listen,
do you believe that they should follow your
I
policies?
would ask why, and maybe I would stand with them, depending on their reasons.
Okay. But do you believe that to run an organized classroom, students need to follow what their teacher says?
In response to academics, yes.
Yeah, well, just behavior, right? They can't be acting up the whole time in the classroom. You're not going to get anything done, right? You know where I'm going with this.
Go
right?
ahead, Randy. Bring it. I mean, this is why we're here. Don't beat around the bush.
Well, it is absolutely.
Yeah,
So there was a policy in
do.
place, and you didn't follow it. You didn't want to follow it.
Absolutely.
So what kind of an example is that are you setting for your own students?
Ask Dr. King. Ask Rosa Parks. Anyone that offered up civil disobedience for the rights of others, that's why.
So you're comparing not wearing a mask to the Montgomery bus boycott.
Absolutely.
Do I
I
have that right?
consider it exactly the same way. You want to govern with fear? Go ahead. You implement policy that's been destructive, hindering learning, especially with the minority community? Go ahead. Yeah, I'll stand. And I'll stand with every parent. And I'll, like I tell you, and I told the judge, I'll do it again.
Okay. Wanted to get that out of the way.
Who in the
Absolutely.
minority community said that was, I respect you for doing that. That's right. You're a grown man. You can do what you want to do, but don't conflate things and act as if at least the African-American community stands with you in that regard. That's not true. But I do respect you for doing what you did. I'm assuming you did it for righteous reasons, but please don't conflate the things. With all due
Oh, no,
respect,
it's
Chris,
not
because
conflated.
that's
Yeah,
not been my
absolutely.
experience in the Black community.
I mean, your experience could be different from mine.
It could
But
be.
I know what I'm standing for. And I mean, maybe the minority people you speak to and I speak to, they may have different views. But maybe that'd be where me and you could bring, our crew, and we could probably dialogue at some point.
But you teach in my neighborhood, so I in spite of what Corey said, I'm not in that. I don't need to misstate anything as far as that goes.
Yeah.
Our reputation is being a straight shooter. I'm just saying the people in my community and in Roosevelt Estates, and definitely the people in Riviera Beach that I know, that you're on the island in that regard. With all due respect, Chris, but I do respect you. If you did it for
Yeah.
righteous reason for what you said, I would not have done that, but I respect you for having the right to do it.
I appreciate it. Like I said, we could one day dialogue.
That's fine,
Bring a
Chris.
couple people, I'll bring mine.
Yes, sir. No problem.
Randy,
Okay,
did you follow to that, or Scott, if you have a question?
okay.
I'm done for the moment. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I had a question. First of all, I wanted to find out, Mr. Persaud, are you going to be returning to, assuming you don't get elected to school board? So, have you been renewed for the next school year to return to the?
No, I wouldn't go.
Were you dismissed, or did you decide to?
Yeah, so you get like a non-reappointment letter. So I mean, basically, it's like you're let go, but you're not let go.
Okay. Do you think that was because of the mask issue?
Absolutely. I mean, it was a hypocritical stance. I took it, but I got arrested by a cop without a mask, and he's a school district employee. So, I mean, look at all that. That's why I could go all the way out and say I did what I did, and I wouldn't take it back. Maybe not everyone agrees, but to some degree, you'll see it'll age much well than what people are taking it now.
Okay. I'd like to hear each of your feelings about the Palm Beach County School District's controversy that they had involving the equity statement, the part about dismantling white advantage, and then the school district's decision to take that out after it became controversial with some people in the community. So if you want to start, Mr. Ferguson.
So my understanding is that I was kind of surprised that they capitulated to the outcry. I mean, if you believe that you were standing in your truth, why change? But I'll leave that for all the respective board members to speak for themselves. I mean, some of the things that we're dealing with now that have been placed upon us from Tallahassee, I would say they're laughable, except they really make me cry because they feel intellectually and emotionally disingenuous. The scales are not balanced. We know that. The question is, what are you going to do in the midst of somebody holding their finger on the scale? I believe that a person should be empowered. I believe that we should focus on making sure that a greater number of our kids are ready to excel from day one. Because as I've said many times before, and I'll say to you now, kids that start behind tend to stay behind. But even in spite of the imbalances of the scale, those who start ahead tend to stay ahead. And just because you may be on the lower economic end of the spectrum, or just because you may be a minority, is not a death sentence in regard to you being able to be a successful person. I believe that a person's attitude determines their altitude. That's my sentiment. And it's this business about critical race theory that certain people are kind of throwing about in this community to try to scare people and shame people is bogus. Show me one teacher, show me one school that actually is teaching this so-called critical race theory. My understanding is that most teachers are trying to just teach a fuller understanding of history, and I think that's good for all Americans. Why are we walking around here with one eye closed. It's a very international economy here. And as an employer for 17 years now, irrespective of where the person is from, I want somebody that's going to help increase my bottom line. If you have certain ignorance, if you will, in your background, that probably would affect me and whether I would hire you. So I think we're doing our children a disservice by essentially making our current history that we want to push forward more propaganda than actually true history. I think that's very dangerous. I think what happened in Germany in the 40s is a testament to that. What has and maybe is happening in Russia right now is a testament to that. And there are many other countries across the world that also support that position, that propaganda ultimately is a terrible thing for the citizens of a respective country. So we're doing ourselves a great disservice right now. And I hope that we can pivot out of that much sooner than later. But I appreciate the question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith.
The question was again
About the school district's decision, the equity statement that mentioned the white
okay.
advantage, and then the decision to take that out because of the controversy.
Well, I believe in meeting children where they are, right? When we talk about equity in education, we have to meet people where they are. So as I wrote in the statement, I understand the historical truth of white advantage. We live in a country where white supremacy has been some of the foundation, right? So we acknowledge that because that hasn't been in the equity statement. There hasn't been an equity statement before. So I can appreciate that we actually acknowledge that as a district now. So that's one of the things that goes towards eliminating, systemic racism. But again, in meeting people where they are, you can understand where some people who might not have been aware of it, there was huge backlash about it. So the equity statement as it reads today accomplishes both goals. So, and I support the equity statement. So if you read the equity statement in its full context, I completely support it because number one, it still accomplishes the goal of recognizing the effects of systemic racism and white supremacy in society, and takes affirmative steps to move forward and eliminating that and educating everybody on an equity-based foundation. So I agree with that. I agree with it.
Okay, and Mr. Persaud, your feeling about the equity?
Yeah, I disagree with it. Anything that you have to retract on, obviously, is something that you misjudged or miscalculated. With that equity statement and with CRT, it's not the fact that you're going to see it named. It's the fact that the spirit and the mindset of it is there. We don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but we wrestle against like mindsets. And I think that's where this concern is. It's not the fact that, oh, well, we can identify it here physically, but it's the mental training that we're doing and that we're giving these educators in position to implement. In essence, it's teaching you to really look at it as, hey, you're either an oppressor or you're an oppressed. And that's where it begins to get a little different for me. The things that I'm seeing and that I believe in is love in Jesus Christ. So when we're not implementing that on a humanity and restoration basis, then what we're doing right now is we're creating more division. And it's actually capitalizing off of hurt. It's capitalizing off pain. It's capitalizing off what people suffered. And to say we didn't make advancements and strides, I absolutely disagree with that. And I disagree that even if you're a biracial kid or anything like that, how is it? That's so confusing and it's demonizing. These kids aren't eligible for that. They're not mature enough for that. So when you're implementing something, I understand you want maybe a better outcome for all, which I agree. And I call that equality. But when we have to pedestal one person over the other and we're not doing what's right, it's not race, it's policy. And and I'm going to run down, it's back to policy all over again. And we need policymakers that care about kids. We need policymakers that are going to challenge the system, not play the blame game, but say, you know what, let's sacrifice. Let's show up to people. If there's a stigma on a race, let's show them that we're different. And that's what I believe in. So I disagree with that equity statement. I do believe it's reverse racism. And I don't believe no child should be taught that, especially if that system came from a collegiate concept.
How is it reverse racism, though? That doesn't make sense. It's not reverse racism. It's not like they're saying that anybody is necessarily better than any particular race. But I do agree with you in one regard. There's entirely too much talking. Even since I was in school here in Palm Beach County, that's always the easy way to write a nice little fluffy statement or whatever the case may be. But where's the action behind it? What has occurred here in Palm Beach County since that initial statement was written, and then even the retraction? I agree with you in that regard, Chris. If you're big and bad enough to write it in the first place, stand by it. But nevertheless, I think we need to get out of the so-called Taj Mahal and get out of the schools and get into the communities and really have true conversations and interactions with the respective community members. Because if you do that, your actions will show that you don't believe in any sort of privilege or whatever the case may be. There's entirely too much talking, and I must say, between the other candidates, that's another thing that distinguishes me between you all, is that I actually get out in the streets proactively. I don't wait for anybody to tell me that it's safe to get out there. If I see something wrong, I speak to it, just like DeAndre Somerville and many other things. Riviera Beach, we tried to get petitions signed in support of a new Riviera Beach Comprehensive High School. Corey Smith actually signed that prior to COVID, as I recall. I'm sure you're going to tell me you didn't now, but I do remember you signing it at Northborough.
Oh, no. Let's clear it up. Let's clear it up. You're not the first person to advocate for a high school in Riviera Beach.
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. Let's listen to what's being said, Corey. Come on.
I absolutely signed the petition to bring high school back to Riviera Beach because I believe in it, and it's something I believed in before you ever ran for office once. So the idea, as a matter of fact, I am a member of the class of students who was affected when the schools changed in 1989 and 1990. I think you're probably in middle elementary school at the time. When that actually happened. It doesn't matter. So, and I actually, and you're not the first person who protested this. I didn't say I was, and that's the point. None of this is new. White privilege is not new. That's what I'm saying. You make yourself out to be someone who's been in the streets and the only person who's advocated on these interests, and you're not. I've actually done it before you, and I continue to do it. And part of my practice is advocating on behalf of the educational equity in the school system. So the idea that advocating and mobilizing are two different things. The idea that, and the question was about let's get back to the question. The question was about the equity statement. And when we talk about, a framework, the equity statement provides the framework. Now we got to fill it in. The equity statement is only a year or so old, and we've been dealing with COVID since then. So now that we're post-COVID and we're back to full implementation of education in Palm Beach County, I think we will be moving towards fulfilling the promises that are in the equity statement. And so, we'll move forward. And when I'm elected school board member, I'll make sure that the district lives up to that promise. I'm happy that we codified it now, but the question is what took so long. It's not like things are any more egregious now than they were when I was in school, when Chris was in school, or you was in school. So that's my point. It's easy to write something down, much more difficult apparently for most persons in the district to follow up their words. And what I'm saying is, with all due respect to codification and writing, you can write something down all the time if you want to. We can write it right here, but can you get it codified as something different? So codification. Florida Statute 1003 was codified when you were just graduated from high school, and I don't see what it's for. Along Florida Statute 1000. So it's not just about being in writing; it's about giving a damn about a thing and actually seeing it through. And I haven't really seen that, with all due respect, an ability to get that done in this particular seat. And I do believe that if I'm elected as the board member, that we'll be able to get that done. Well, I'm not running against Dr. Robinson. You are. I'm running for the seat. I just said, well, I'm not sure what you heard me say just now, but I said, yes. Well, you just said it's in 03. I wasn't in the seat. I didn't say 03. I said the Florida Statute 1003 was codified and was law back shortly after you graduated from high school, or actually shortly after I graduated from high school, which means it would have been enacted sometime during your college years or shortly after your college graduation. So if you look at that statute, I don't see what the need for this to be, with all due respect, that what we just spoke about even needed to be put forth there. There's already laws that say we should be doing certain things. So the fact that you're not talking about, not you, but white privilege. If we can move on, I appreciate that. But actually, I want to talk about this issue, but a more broader part of it. And Mr. Persaud, I wanted to ask you this because I know you were clear about you didn't like the statement that the school district had put out. Now that the white advantage statement has been taken out, what do you feel about it now? And just in general, what I've been noticing, I've been hearing more from some of the more conservative people in the past year, is that there seems to be a concern about just the whole concept of equity. So what's your feeling about that? There's people who feel like equity somehow is equal results as opposed to equal opportunity. So what's your feeling about this school district statement now that it doesn't have the white advantage in it? And what's your feeling about the concept of equity?
My concept is, and I'll just revert back to what I said before, is that they implemented something they couldn't, with conviction, stand by. So obviously it wasn't something that should have been even implemented, something that wasn't thought out, something that wasn't planned. I don't like the way it's set up because they want to teach a history that's not entirely true. It's a biased. It doesn't show strides. It doesn't show where we've come from and how far we've came. So
But we're not talking about teaching critical race theory here. We're talking specifically about the equity statement that Palm Beach County Schools has adopted. So
you look at, I mean, it's one with the other. I mean, they typically go hand in hand. I mean, when you really look at it, the mindset of equity is really to be implemented through critical race theory. I mean, it validates it. So I'll just go back. If you push something that you couldn't stand by, then that shouldn't have even been a consideration to implement.
do you think there is systemic racism in this country?
I believe everybody, and this is where we got to start judging people's heart. I believe if you're white, if you're black, if you're brown, you're Hispanic, you're anything, I believe you can have a prejudice. I believe you could have something inside of you, which you want to call it sin. That's what I would call it. You want to call it bitterness.
But Mr. Persaud, I'm not talking on an individual level here. I'm talking about systems. I'm talking about how Glade's community doesn't perform as well as Boca Raton community. I'm talking about incarceration rates, that kind of thing. Do you think there's systemic racism?
I believe it, and I believe it's been implemented by far left policies. You have the same people, the same year by year by year by year, and they haven't even done anything for the community. You look at them, what have they done for the Black community? What have they done? We're going and looking at policy that's crippled the nation to its knees, and we're sitting here arguing about tax increases for our people, which we're trying to help teachers, but then look at the communities that's struggling. Within this last year, the policies that the far left and people that support that side have done has crippled the Black community to their knees. So when systemic racism is brought up, I believe it's brought up because of the policies that are implemented now that weren't in the previous administration when things were much better.
Okay, thank you. We have gone beyond our 45 minutes. I would like to give everybody a chance to do an elevator pitch. Wrap this up. Having heard what you've heard out of your opponents in the last the last 45 minutes, and what you've heard at other community events where you may have gathered previously, make a pitch to a voter about why you should be the candidate to win this race. Since we started off in alphabetical order, we will go in reverse alphabetical order and start with Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Corey Smith for School Board 7. I'll do it exactly like I did in the voters' home on Saturday when they asked, hey, we know Mr. Ferguson, Mr. Persaud's name didn't come up. And say, you guys are pretty similar. You're both attorneys. You both got kids in the system. What's different? I said, well, this is the thing. And I have no doubt about Mr. Ferguson's intentions and his love for the community and his desire to do well for the kids in our community. The question is, who's most experienced at doing the work that needs to be done? And I submit to you that I am. Again, I am the only one in this race who has the education experience that I have. I'm the only one in this race who dedicates a significant portion of his practice to education law, which means that I support schools that do right by kids. I've written policies. One of my biggest wins is that back in probably about 8 or 9 years ago, myself and Steve Gallen, who's the vice chair of the Miami-Dade School Board, we negotiated white hat management out of Florida. They were the most egregious charter operator, one of the most egregious charter operators, where they took 97% of the FTE back to their parent company in Ohio. He and I brought them here to West Palm Beach on Tamarind Avenue, where my office was at the time, and we negotiated them out of Florida. Now, we can talk about other things, but the bottom line is that I've done this work. I continue to do it, and I'm going to keep continuing to do it. I've been dedicated to this community for all my life, practically, in a number of ways. I serve on the I serve on the academic advisory committee, and I serve on the budget advisory committee. So I'm well prepared for this job. It's not something that I got to learn. I don't have to learn sunshine. I don't have to learn ethics. I don't have to learn Robert's rules. These are things that I don't have to learn them because that's what I do right now. So it's not a question of, do we have good intentions? Do we have good platforms? Because our platforms are fairly similar if you actually compare them, because we understand the issues. The issues have been there forever. We know that. The question is, who's got the experience to get it done? And I submit to you that my candidacy stands above the rest. Corey Smith.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Persaud, go ahead.
Lord, I just want to thank you this day. And I just want to give you the glory, the honor, and the praise, and ask that you forgive me for my sins and everything I've done to offend you. Lord, I'm Chris Persaud. I'm your servant. I'm your child for District 7. And I'm just asking in this race, these are your children. These are your kids, that you cover them in this race. And even with Edwin, even with Corey and myself, as we're running, God, I do believe I am the best candidate. But I believe, Lord, your will be done. Whether it be any one of us, oh God, I pray that you speak to our hearts, speak to our minds, because we decided to champion this thing for our children, for the kids. And Lord, let it be your glory. Let it be unto you, Lord. Let bitterness, strife, envy, all those things be set apart from us. But Lord, I'm asking, Lord, that the reality of truth and facts come forth. And I'm asking convictions be held. And Lord, I believe, Lord, in all things, Lord, that I will be District 7's champion, and I will fight. I will be honorable towards you and towards the people in District 7. And I'm asking, oh God, that you bless all of us in Jesus' name. Amen. Chris Persaud, School Board District 7.
All right, thank you. Mr. Ferguson, wrap this up for us.
Yes. Thanks again, everyone, for giving us an opportunity to state our respective cases. Again, I'm Edwin Ferguson, candidate for Palm Beach County School Board District 7. In amongst trial attorneys, we have a kind of a joke. When you don't have the facts, you argue the law. When you don't have the law, you argue the facts. Mr. Smith would have you again to believe that because he spent 6 or however many years as an assistant district attorney, school board attorney, that somehow that makes him more fit for this position. And I would submit to you that what makes you more fit for this position is whether you are able to build consensus amongst people who may have divergent opinions, which I have done. I'm currently the chair of the County Planning Commission meeting. I didn't ask for that particular position. My colleagues asked that I serve in that position because they saw that I have an ability to, again, find points of consensus so that we can move forward. That's the problem. I think particularly in District 7, I'll speak to that. Our kids are stagnant. If you look at Riviera Beach, for example, over the last 10 or 15 years, generally speaking, 60 to 70% of the children are not ready for kindergarten. And that's relevant because a lot of those same children aren't ready for the 3rd grade standardized tests. And there are certain correlations that I'm sure you all are aware of, and a lot of them are not ready to excel once they graduate. My platform is based on the fact that we have to do a better job as a school board of making sure that our children are ready to compete, be civic-minded individuals who are ready to add to the community and not simply wait for assistance from the community. They have the abilities, and it's our job to help bring that out as far as that goes. And one last point I'll make in closing. At every point up to this point, I don't know which direction this news organization will go, but Mr. Smith and I have been screened by a number of different organizations: CTA, BizPac, Economic Council, AFL-CIO. They've not rendered a judgment as of yet as far as who they're supporting. FOP and the PBA. Those other 5 organizations have supported me, and I think it's because they realize it's not about what you know, but who you can help build consensus among. How fluid you are, or flexible, I should say, in going into different rooms, again, with people with divergent opinions, and still being able to come out with something that's ultimately for the betterment of the community and, most importantly, our children. And at the end of the day, I think the voters will see that Edwin Ferguson is the one that's the best choice amongst this honorable group of men. And I appreciate your time. Have a good day.
Yeah. Hey, Dan, it's interesting. Right before Mr. Ferguson started naming his endorsements, that was what I actually wanted to find out if each of the candidates could tell me who some of your top endorsements are. Just real quickly, not all of them, but maybe the top 3 or 4.
Sure. Yeah. Just stick with top 3. Mr. Ferguson, you've named several already, but of those you named, could you just quickly give your top 3?
I know a question to CTA, the classroom teacher. If I don't know if I mentioned it, I think I did. CTA is most definitely, unquestionably, the most important party to endorse me at this point.
Okay.
And then if I had to say, I think the board chair, Frank Barbieri, I think that's an important one. Barbara McQuinn, they're all important, but definitely the ones that relate to education, I would honestly have to say are the ones that I'm most happy to tell you I've been endorsed by: CTA, Frank Barbieri, and also Barbara McQuinn.
Okay. Mr. Smith, endorsements?
Yeah, I'm very proud to have the endorsement of the SEIU, the service employees of similar to their union, just like the CTA is, but they serve the lesser employees, quote unquote, because I advocate for them because I'm a parent and I actually deal with bus drivers and cafeteria workers and janitors on a daily basis. I also obviously have the endorsement of Dr. Deborah Robinson, When we talk about other school board members getting in other school board races, that's a practice that's kind of odd, but I also have the endorsement of former Mayor Jerry Moyo, former Mayor Michael Brown, and I'm got word today that I'm going to get another one, but I can't go public with it.
Fair. Mr. Persaud?
I just got the endorsement of heaven right now.
Fair enough. All right. Well, we'll have to end on that. I thank you. I thank all three of you for joining us today. And if we have any further questions, we will follow up with you individually.
Thank
Thank
everybody.
you very much.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Good luck,
All right.
everybody.
Thank you all.
Have a
Y'all
good
have
day.
a good night.
Take care. All right.